All right, everybody, I'm just going to get rolling here. So, good morning. Welcome to Actsafe's webinar on bullying and harassment prevention for supervisors. Super happy to have all of you here. Quick acknowledgement of the lands that we live and play on, the traditional indigenous lands. Actsafe office and organization is located on the stolen lands of the Squamish, Stolo, Kikite, Tsleil-Waututh, and Chemainus peoples. And we are very honored to work on those lands and work with those peoples as often as we can. So please feel free to follow up and go to nativeland.ca to check out what lands you're hanging out on and involve them in your organizations and keep that conversation going. Moving on to a few housekeeping things. Those of you who don't know that might be new here, we are Actsafe. We are the Health and Safety Association for the Performing Arts Live Event and television industries here in British Columbia. My name is Don Parman. I am the manager of live events and performing arts here at Actsafe. Just so you know, we have a website loaded with stuff. We're going to refer to a few things today in this course. During this webinar, we have an anti-bullying and harassment course. We also have all of the performing arts safety awareness, performing arts safety for supervisors, joint health and safety committee training. We have over 23 courses and workshops that we offer. So please check out the website and take a look through it. We also have subsidized programming for first aid, lift training. All of those things are things that we tackle with our organization, as well as our annual conference and our APE week and our industry awards gala. The conference and awards gala are upcoming. We'll give you some more information later. We're still working out details on that. So, and of course, Grégoire, stay tuned for that because you may be called on to come and hang out with us when we do that one as well. And as for that, we also always want your participation. So if you ever have questions, concerns, or issues that you think that we should be tackling, please reach out to myself, on Encana, any of our safety advisors, or just go through our website and use the chat feature because our admin team would be happy to help and direct you to the right people to start having those conversations. So I'm trying to keep the business to a minimum here. Lastly, I just wanted to talk really quickly about what we're going to do today. So we're going to have Grégoire Gagnon talk about his content. I'm going to follow up afterwards and go over a new resource we created, which is the anti-bullying harassment response checklist that we created. And then we're going to go into a Q&A, and hopefully we can have a good discussion about what that's going to look like and how we can really move things forward. Because both Grégoire and myself have had a fair bit of experience tackling some of the stuff over the last few years, and some interesting stories and methodologies in order to help get you through that. And last, but most certainly not least, a couple of things I just want to, this is a respectful workplace, so please keep your comments respectful. Remember that people we share stories that can be sensitive, and I also want to let people know that sometimes when we're talking about this topic, there can be some triggering or upsetting stories that are told, so please be aware, and feel free to reach out if you feel that there's anything that we need to address that's been discussed. Last but not least, I want to introduce Grégoire Gagnon. He is with the Cultural Human Resources. Good friend of Actsafe, has been helped us out for years and joined us for APE week last year, I think it was. And we had a really good time talking with him, working with him. So I just wanted y'all to welcome him here today. So Greg, take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Don. Thanks for that introduction. And I really do hope people take you up on that offer of looking at Actsafe's resources. What's really fun about Actsafe is that to anybody who's on this call, you probably know them better than I do, but you're not a punitive arm. You're there to help. So that you're the good guys in all cases. So I really encourage people. And there's so much stuff that's available out there. So I really hope that people will take you up on that offer and get to access those resources and services that you offer. There's so much. So here we are here today to talk about anti-bullying and harassment for supervisors. And being myself the executive director of CHRC, and through different roles, I know how it can be a challenge for people that have other people working for them to look at these things and to make sure that they stay current and up to date. And I've seen the new resource that Don is going to share, and I'm not going to steal Don's thunder on this, but I went through it and I thought, wow, this is really good consolidation of the stuff that you need to be aware of. I'm going to take a bit of a lengthier approach, and we're going to look at this in a very holistic manner. from employers, supervisors, and workers' standpoint. There's a lot of information. I do speak rather rapidly, it's kind of some people have said it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. I hope to give as much information as possible. Actsafe is going to be sharing this slide deck, so don't worry if you missed something, you didn't have a chance to copy it down. There's about a zillion URL links embedded in the presentation that you can access later, and if I'm not mistaken, we're recording, so you can always revisit any of this. So if there is any questions about the material that we're presenting as we're going along, if something's unclear and if I've started to ramble, you can call me out on it. I'm sure Don will.
Just a quick note. Yes, we are recording. I forgot to mention that. Thank you for the reminder. And we do have closed captioning available. So if you guys need that service, please, it's in the toolbar at the bottom. So please feel free to use it. Thanks.
Yeah, so give us a shout if something is unclear. But otherwise, we'll wait for comments and kind of any type of sharing without going into anything that could be traumatic or difficult for anybody. We'll save that for the Q&A. So here we are today. For those of you that don't know CHRC, the Cultural Human Resources Council, HR is in the middle of the name. We are interested in everything that has to do with the human side of work in arts and culture. And that obviously includes everything with TV broadcasting, stage performances, live performances, writing, publishing, all of that we are interested in, both from the employer side to the employee or independent contract work side. So look us up. We're happy to help anybody in the cultural sector. We are a national arts service organization that is a registered charity. Myself, musician, teacher, manager, as Don said, I've dealt with quite a few of these things, and what I am not, though, is I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a trauma-informed specialist, counselor, or therapist. So I'm not at all in any position to approach this as legal advice in this discussion or as a support, mental support, or even physical support. I am here approaching this really from a managerial perspective and sharing with other supervisors, managers on what we need to be mindful of. And the resources that we're looking at today are really BC specific. And for those of you who are wondering, it looks like I'm maybe in a bad position to discuss this. The accident that I suffered through was just standing by the side of the street, completely freak accident that had nothing to do with lack of safety on set or at the workplace. So don't don't worry about that. We can share some of those stories later, but you have my contact here and it will be shared in the chat along with CHRC's website. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about BC stuff. So I've broken this down into three large parts. The first one will be legislation and definitions, and this is all publicly accessible information. And I encourage everybody to fact check. Don't just take my word for it. If I'm pulling this stuff and information from your official websites. So from WorkSafe BC, the Workers' Compensation Act, and the Human Rights Code, because we all need to kind of be on the same page for the starting point. BC human rights, just because it's an important thing and it is the source of a lot of bullying and harassment. I think it's important that we have that up there. There are personal characteristics that are protected under the BC Human Rights Code. So any one of these that show up, I won't read them off. I despise using PowerPoint as a teleprompter. Anything that shows up here is really protected under the human rights. So beyond any workers' compensation or WorkSafe ideas, this stuff is fundamental. You can't touch this. Be respectful and be mindful of others. If you have any questions, because you may have been slighted in the past or feel that you've been slighted on any of these personal characteristics, there is a BC Human Rights Clinic that you can ask further questions or get more information from. There is a nonprofit exemption to this, and I just like to mention it for just for clarity purposes. Sometimes some organizations can do something that looks like discrimination. It's not discrimination. For example, if you're offering a shelter of some sort for a certain clientele or a certain group, it is okay to hire folks that are part of that same group to avoid further trauma or further impact on the people that you are there to serve. That nonprofit exemption is very clear and it's very common sense. You can look that up if ever you want after this presentation, but I won't go any further into that. Discrimination in employment. Obviously, we can't discriminate in a broad sense for any of those personal characteristics or other when we're hiring folks, when we're working with folks. It's really important to be respectful of everybody, especially for those human rights protected grounds. Definitions. Okay. What is an employer? What is a worker? And what is a supervisor? We want to be clear on that. So, an employer is basically anybody who hires or who pays for services from somebody else. And it used to be back in the day, we only had the Employment Standards Act, which would have covered protecting workers, and then, independent contractors weren't covered. But the legislations are all moving towards covering anybody. So if you're paying for somebody's services or if somebody's working for you, even if they're an unpaid person, they are most likely, or if not definitely, protected under the legal statutes. Again, I can't provide legal advice, but it's pretty clear by this definition that if somebody is working for you, providing work of any sort, you are responsible for them. Worker, and this includes a wide swath of people, including learners who are there. So if you've got interns, be mindful of them. It's not because they're an intern that you can bully or harass them or any other unpleasant behavior like that. Do not engage in that type of behavior with anybody who's working for or around you as well. Supervisors, this is where we're kind of in the tough spot, because we in some senses are representatives of the employer and have to make sure that we are the eyes and ears on the ground, at that level, to be able to see. So a supervisor is anybody who instructs, directs, and controls the performance of others in their duties, whether you have the title supervisor or not. And there is a whole bunch of titles out there. Basically, if you are responsible for other people's work, you are in essence a supervisor, whether that supervision is direct or not. At the same time, supervisors fall under the category of workers. And the more we look at these different categories and the roles and responsibilities that are tied to them, the more we see that everybody is responsible, and it may vary how you're responsible, but in the end, we are all responsible for our behavior and for our interactions with others in the workplace. Another definition that we sometimes have to talk about is reasonable person, because we hear in the rules and, and regulations that let's say inappropriate conduct or comment made by a person towards another worker that someone ought to reasonably to have known. So somebody who can exercise a regular or fair degree of attention, knowledge, and intelligence and judgment towards a situation would be considered a reasonable person. If you were to come into the workspace and say, "Oh, hi, how are you doing?" and that person says, "No, you're bullying me because you're asking me how I'm doing," that would probably not pass the reasonable person standard. So, uh, it is subjective, but I think if we put our common sense hats on, it's really easy to exercise. But this is the definition that also shows up on WorkSafe BC's documents, so you might want to take note of it. Bullying and harassment defined. So this comes up in every single WorkSafe document, I think, and resource that they have. Any inappropriate conduct or comment by a person towards a worker that the person knew or ought to have known would cause that worker to be humiliated or intimidated. So one of the distinctions we have here is that it's not necessarily worker to worker, but the people that are working for you, if they are receiving inappropriate conduct or comments by somebody else, even if they're not tied to the workflows, clients, patrons, audience members, towards one of the workers that are involved, this falls under bullying and harassment. Now, this excludes any reasonable action taken by an employer or supervisor relating to the management of work and direction of workers, or the pace of employment. And we'll look at examples of bullying and harassment a bit later. And right now, we'll just focus on making sure that we have a common understanding of all this. So, just a reminder: a worker could be a paid employee, a contractor, or an unpaid learner. And person. So, this includes any individual that would be interacting with your workforce. Bullying in layman's terms. This is not an official BC thing. I'm just putting this in here because I really like this definition as a general kind of catch all. Targeted behavior with the objective to disempower. I think that explains it very well. And or the assertion of power through aggression. So if you see anything that looks like that, there's a really fair chance, if not a complete, uh, you know, uh, indication of bullying that's happening somewhere. Again, in layman's terms, it can be anything that's directed, not necessarily at a person in particular. You could be bullying somebody by, you know, some inappropriate banter between two colleagues that somebody else is feeling offended by or intimidated or humiliated by. So we have to be careful. And when you're thinking about your workplace, if it's not a professional conversation, maybe it shouldn't happen in that space. And so any objectionable comment, act, display that demeans, belittles, compromises, or causes humiliation or embarrassment can be considered bullying and harassment. One that we won't talk too much about today, but is definitely part of the larger bullying and harassment file, is sexual harassment. So, if you look up the resource that we pulled this from, they do talk about sex discrimination and sexual harassment together. Basically, harassment or bullying of any form that has some gender related or sex related connotation would be considered sexual harassment. So be mindful of that. We've seen so many bad behaviors out there. I hope that this isn't a surprise to anybody. So that's just another level or layer of harassment and bullying that we can see in the workplace to be avoided completely. Workplace violence, because sometimes we're afraid to call it for what it is. I've had somebody in a workshop say, I was feeling harassed one day when somebody threw a chair at my head. So I step out of my role as kind of a neutral person and say that I'm sorry, that's not harassment. That's outright violence. That's assault. We have to be able to call things for what they are. And if you need more information on this violence at work, there is workplace violence standard information available, and this is a national resource. I thought I'd just throw that in there as well. So any kind of physical attacks or verbal abuse can also be considered violence. So let's not be afraid to call the bad behavior by what it really is. Okay, so that was definitions and legislation, just to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page in terms of these terms. Um, the next segment, if I can call it that, will be roles and responsibilities, and this is where we want to make sure that everybody understands how they fit in the workplace and tackling bullying and harassment. We like to talk about anti this and anti that, but we can also be pro this, pro that, and let's promote proper workplace behavior. And one of the first steps is really to know what our own responsibility is in the workplace. So we will look at this through the employer lens, the supervisor lens, the worker lens, and all workers basically together. The first round of roles and responsibilities, we look at the employers. So obviously employers have that responsibility to ensure that health and safety for everybody involved in their workspace is taken care of. And there's a whole bunch of explanatory sorry, explanatory explanation notes. I'm not gonna be able to say the word. If you look at this last bullet here, this is where we kind of sum up everything that the employer has to do: inform, instruct, train, supervise, ensure safety and health for their workers and other workers, because on our own work sites that we have other workers that come in sometimes, and that's one of the terms that comes up. We have to be mindful of everybody who's working on our sites as employers. So that first line of prevention and defense starts with the people that are the owners and employers in the business. So we can go into a lot of detail here, but again, it comes back: information, instruction, training, and supervision that are necessary. Employers have to do this to ensure that their workforce is prepared and informed on workplace hazards, bullying and harassment being a workplace hazard as well. And this is all part of the act, so the Workers' Compensation Act. Uh, Employers have to take reasonable steps to address the hazard, and when we look at that previous information: inform, instruct, train, and supervise, those are all the reasonable steps that have to be taken. So develop a policy statement, take steps to prevent, develop and implement procedures for reporting incidents and complaints, because sometimes we need to report incidents. It's not necessarily a complaint, but we saw something, or there was an incident. It doesn't necessarily have to take the form of a complaint. It can just be reporting on, hey, this happened at work. So develop and implement policies that allow for those reporting mechanisms. Uh, Develop and implement the actual procedures with how these incidents and complaints are going to be received, and what are the next steps. So how and when an investigation will be conducted, and what's included in an investigation, that scope question. What are the roles and responsibilities of the people that are involved, and what kind of follow-up is going to come out of that investigation? Also, what's the expectation for record keeping? All of this, we have to inform our workers on. They have to be made aware of these steps that we're taking, and what are the protections in place. It is also the employer's responsibility to train supervisors and workers on recognizing those potential hazards for bullying and harassment and how that reporting procedure can go. So, part of what we're seeing today actually falls into that, I'll say, training in supervisors and workers, even if this is a simple information session. All of this has to be reviewed annually. So it is an employer's responsibility to do so. And as supervisors, we can gently nudge, respectfully nudge our employers into making sure that they comply with this so that we, have the tools that are necessary so that we as supervisors can actually do our part in the workplace. As a supervisor, it's really hard to enforce policies that don't exist. So again, that respectful nudge to your employer, say, hey, this is something that needs to be taken care of. And obviously, the last 2 points, it's kind of funny that we have to put them there, but they're there. Not engage in bullying and harassment is just so common sense. And then applying and complying with the employer procedures, applying and complying with your own procedures would really be a good thing to engage in as an employer. Now, supervisors, what is, the supervisor role in this general duties that we have here? And again, you've got all these links. So anything that's got some form of underlining, there's usually a link tied to it, and really easy to access, really easy information to access. So the supervisor also has the duty to take all reasonable steps to ensure health and safety in the workplace. And the policy that this is from wants to ensure that everything stays consistent. And all of these documents that are available from WorkSafe all kind of repeat the same thing. There's a whole bunch of redundancies, but it's I think they did a really good job with the redundancies to avoid anybody falling into a crack and saying, "Oh, well, I guess I didn't know that part of it." No, no. They're all reflecting and they're all saying the same thing. So as supervisors, we have to, be that line of defense and prevention that reflects those policies and workplace safety mechanisms. So again, we have to ensure the health and safety of anybody who's under our direct supervision. And it goes without saying, supervisors cannot engage in bullying and harassment and have to really apply and comply with the policies and also find ways to avoid or mitigate, reduce any of those circumstances in which bullying and harassment can occur. Which leads us towards the worker side of thing. Now, again, supervisors fall kind of on both sides of the equation. They're somewhere between the employer and they are actual workers themselves. So, supervisors, don't forget, you are also protected under these statutes and rules and regulations and definitions. You are also a worker and should not have to suffer bullying and harassment. So every worker, whether you're a supervisor or not, also has to take, has that duty to take reasonable steps and precautions to ensure health and safety in the environment for yourselves and for others. And uh, again, common sense. Do not engage in bullying and harassing, and report if you see any bullying and harassment. So that works on both sides as a supervisor and a worker. You are held to report. On the other side, you can be the one who actually receives the reports and has to act on them. And that can, be different according to the policies and procedures that are in place. So you really want to be aware of those to make sure you're not falling short in your own responsibilities and duties. If you are uncertain about any of this, now, as I said earlier, and as Don alluded to, there's a really great resource that Actsafe has put together, super well written, very easy I'll say to digest. If ever you wanted, WorkSafe has. I stopped counting how many resources. I'm really pleased with how WorkSafe has approached this. But you've got some very very simple fact sheets: the employer fact sheet, the worker fact sheet, the supervisor fact sheet, and you can access these with one click. It brings you to the right page, and you can download that fact sheet, and you've got that checklist, which includes all of the stuff that we discussed that was on previous slides. And just to make it even easier, they've put together a checklist of duties for all three categories of persons working in the workplace. Don, you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. We'll follow up in a little bit with that as well.
Yeah. Okay, so all of that is great, but we actually need to think about conflict. How does that show up? So I'm just seeing the chat here. A few Can you make sure you drop? Yeah. Okay. So we got 100% from Jennifer there. Okay. So all of these rules and regulations are in place, but we have to be mindful that things still do happen, and that's one of the start lines for one of CHRC's studies was, harassment still happens. We have to acknowledge that. So conflict. This is the third kind of large section of this presentation, or at least my part of the presentation. Conflict, prevention, recognizing, and actually responding. And this is where a lot of people fall short, or actually, people have been falling short on all three of these subcomponents for a long time, and this is why it's an uphill battle. But if we look at all three parts of it, we can eventually systemically, reduce and maybe one day eliminate bullying and harassment. So, conflict is the title of this section, but we're hoping that we're not having conflict. And a lot of people shy away from the word conflict. Conflict isn't necessarily bullying and harassment or sexual harassment. Sometimes it's just a question of not being on the same page, and that's totally okay if it's done respectfully. So we will see, examples of bullying and harassment, and what is not bullying and harassment, because that's also very important to understand. So, much like the previous section, roles and responsibilities, the prevention side of thing is really the same elements. So, obviously, employers have that duty to provide information, instruction, training, and supervision. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating and redundant, but if anybody needs that to hear it 5 or 6, 7 times, we can do it. And if you need to share this with your employer, if they see it on 5 or 6 different slides, then maybe that message will get across. I'm hoping that people take their responsibilities and do this. WorkSafe BC has a resource toolkit that is always my go-to whenever we're talking about this stuff. So you've got, a handbook on preventing and addressing workplace bullying and harassment. The Small Business Guide to Bullying and Harassment. It's a shorter version, and oftentimes we say, as smaller organizations or self-employed persons or small medium enterprises, we don't have the bandwidth to deal with it. The resources are there. You can pull them. You can cut and paste stuff. They've made it really easy. So I think you should be proud of your taxpayer dollars going to this entity that's there to protect and enforce. Policy on bullying and harassment. They've got a sample policy you can use. Slap your logo on, change a few words in there, and you've got a policy in place. Training. They've got a training tool, which is much like the one we're discussing today, uh, that has all these resources embedded in it as well. Complaint and incident reporting mechanism. They've already got a template ready for you. Investigation procedures. There's a guide on that and an investigations guide. So if you actually need to investigate, all of these resources are available for employers and can be shared with supervisors as well. Supervisors, feel free to look these up. It's free and it's out there. So just walking back through what an employer can and has to do to prevent is to develop that policy statement, take steps to prevent, develop and implement procedures for reporting mechanism, develop and implement procedures to deal with incidents and complaints, inform workers, train supervisors and workers on uh, potential and actual, bullying and harassment, and those reporting procedures that appear up there. Review everything on a yearly basis, and if it's done well, I'll say the first time, it's really easy to evergreen this stuff. Obviously, again, do we even have to say it? Don't engage in bullying and harassment, and apply and comply with the policies and procedures. So that's the prevention side. How to recognize workplace bullying and harassment. Again, we've seen this, and most of us have experienced this at some point. Not all inappropriate, offensive, or disrespectful conduct is bullying and harassment. Some people just are rude out there, but it isn't necessarily a bullying and harassment means. There can also be cultural differences where people have a different way of approaching situations. Some people are a little more abrupt or upfront about how they speak to others. It doesn't mean that it's bullying and harassing. But, if it's humiliating and intimidating, there we go. That's bullying and harassment. So if there's verbal aggressions, insults, calling someone derogatory names, that's beyond just being rude or impolite. That is bullying and harassment. Harassment. If you are vandalizing stuff, sabotaging others' work, this goes without saying. It's bullying and harassment. Malicious rumors or gossip, engaging in harmful or offensive initiation practices. Back in the day, that was kind of a fun thing to do, but no, it's not. It's not appropriate for the workplace. is no longer tolerated and should not be tolerated. Personal attacks, aggressive or threatening gestures, and I hope that my abundant gesticulation here isn't seen as threatening or aggressive. It's just very animated. Call me out if ever I can just put my arm down and talk without moving. The other big point, and so many people got away with this for so long, but this is no longer possible. Intent does not determine whether the behavior is bullying and harassment. A person can't excuse that behavior by saying, "Oh, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it that way." That doesn't mean that sometimes somebody can't just slip up, make a good faith mistake. Um, you know, hey, what's in your lunchbox? That looks good, and somebody feels intimidated or humiliated. Let's go back to the reasonable person standard. Is this a situation that can be dealt with as, okay, so I understand this person doesn't like that, or feels intimidated or humiliated? Do we need to go to court because somebody said your lunch looks good? That can be a bigger discussion. But if we can deal with things at a lower conflict level, I'd encourage people to do so. But when necessary, bring it up, report incidents, and make those complaints. So be mindful. You can't get away with jokes anymore just because you didn't intend to be bullying or harassing. Won't fly. What is not harassment? I don't know about you, but I've had those friends, colleagues that say, I'm feeling harassed at work. It's how so? Well, the boss asked me to come in on time again. Well, sorry, that's not harassment. If the boss is asking you to come in on time, it's because you're late and you shouldn't be late to a call. So that's just, I'll say, a comical example. And some other people have tried different things, and we may or may not have witnessed them where somebody was claiming harassment, but really they weren't being harassed. It was simply something that could be dealt with on a very light interpersonal level. So expressing differences of opinion would not necessarily constitute harassment. Constructive feedback, legitimate complaint about someone's conduct through established procedures and policies, and that's why we need those from the employer and enforced by supervisors as well and all workers. Um, Reasonable management action can include job duties that need to be performed, workloads or deadlines. The layoffs happen; they aren't necessarily bullying or harassment. Instructions and supervision or feedback, performance evaluation. I've seen that one often. People say I'm being harassed in my performance evaluation. No, if you're not meeting the standards that were set out as part of the contract or agreement, then it's legitimate for somebody to say you're not meeting that mark. Discipline, suspensions, or terminations for a variety of reasons do not necessarily constitute bullying and harassment. So, again, how are these carried out could be a manifestation of bullying and harassment. But if they're done in a respectful and constructive manner, they are most likely not bullying or harassment. Telltale signs, workplaces and persons in workplaces are affected by bullying and harassment. So, supervisors out there, if you see some of these telltale signs, you might want to look into it a little further. People that seem to have difficulties concentrating or making decisions that can eventually also lead to safety hazards. If people are looking distressed, anxious, sleep patterns can be affected. Substance abuse, suicidal thoughts, or actions. Physical illness can also be a telltale sign. Reduced work performance. So all of these are things that we can see in individuals that are very common in people that are suffering from that are the targets of bullying and harassment. Effects on the workplace. There can be a very reduced efficiency, productivity, higher stress levels, absentee and turnover rates, and higher levels of client dissatisfaction. Because if people aren't performing properly, clients typically aren't as satisfied. So these are just kind of easy telltale signs that might help you identify bullying and harassment in the workplace, or at least that there are targets of bullying and harassment in the workplace. If you didn't know how to recognize sexual harassment, we've got this here just to help out. Any form of unwanted touching, offensive jokes about and this is outdated material. So any offensive jokes or remarks about another person. Sorry, we're going to strike that, women or men. Sorry, I don't know how that slipped by. I guess they didn't update the WorkSafe one, so we'll let them know. I think. Don, let's put a pin in that. Making sexual suggestions or requests. You really shouldn't be doing that at work. So don't do that. Staring or unwelcome comments about someone's body, showing sexual pictures or images. It usually isn't part of the job. Don't do it, please. Being verbally abusive to someone because of gender or any sex related elements, do not engage in any of these, please. And if you see anybody engaging in this, it is your responsibility to report these incidents or handle these complaints. Okay, so if hopefully all of those will help you in preventing and recognizing the bullying and harassment that can happen in the workplace. In terms of response, this is also a spot where a lot of people fall short, and that fall short oftentimes is a reflection of the lack of prevention or the lack of awareness and knowledge and information and training on the subject matter. So hopefully this at least we get to the respond part with everything else covered off. So whether you're witnessing or reporting, whether you're an employer, supervisor, or worker, you have an obligation to act. And this first part here at the top is I'll say a commentary. CHRC. I'm pretty sure Actsafe would endorse it. If it's safe to do so, intervene. But if it's not, or you're uncertain of your authority on the matter, find the policy, find the reporting procedure, find the mechanism through which you can make this known. Uh, okay, so we've got a really good question. I think we should probably save that for the Q&A later. But this is one of those things where if the policies and procedures are in place, everybody is protected. And one of the things that'll come up a bit later if I answer the question, I'm not sure if this was meant to be um, anonymous or not, so I won't say who mentioned the question. But if the behavior is condoned by nepotism, there actually is a mechanism through WorkSafe that you can file a complaint. So if the employer is not following their own procedures or the investigations and things are not taken care of properly, you can actually call WorkSafe and either get some advice or be able to have a complaint heard. I haven't accessed that mechanism, so I don't know to what extent they do that, but there is a hotline that you can call if you feel that your employment situation or work situation is not addressing the issue satisfactorily. And totally get the nepotism thing. I've seen and lived not pleasant, but everybody has to be accountable and everybody is responsible and accountable. So the direct answer to your question will come a bit later. We'll get to it very soon. Okay, what can coworkers do to stop bullying and harassment? That is a link that comes from WorkSafe, and the suggestions are kind of obvious. Listen to the target. Don't gossip. You can offer support, direct them towards, the resources that exist. And if you're in a position to do so, you should really document what you see just in case there is an investigation or whether you have to lead that investigation or are part of an investigation. What are the dates, the details? Were there any witnesses? And going back to that first point, if it's safe to do so, intervene, tell the bully to stop. In some cases, it is most likely a responsibility of yours as a supervisor to immediately address and say shut down whatever behavior is happening. But again, gauge that safety thing. If somebody's wielding a crowbar or a hammer, you know, mitigate that. Make sure you're not putting yourself even more in harm's way. But those are very delicate situations. And you know what? If it comes to that, call the police. Find a way to make that behavior stop, please. Responding to workplace bullying and harassment. This is again directly a WorkSafe BC resource. Uh, Report to your employer if you've experienced or witnessed bullying and harassment at work. And so here's that. Actually, it came up sooner than I thought. Sorry, it was a big deck. So, if your employer does not have bullying and harassment policies or has not taken the reasonable steps to address the incident, you've got a prevention hotline. Now, it seems a little bit buried in the middle of the slide deck, but it also reappears at the end when we've got the support and help page for you. And again, all of this will be shared with you. So, if you feel that things are not actually happening the way they should, you have another resource which is completely external to your own workplace through WorkSafe BC. And if after the reporting incident has happened, you may submit a bullying and harassment. You may have a chat with them. There's a questionnaire, and a prevention officer can then review and determine whether or not to make further inquiries. Now, I'm not making these promises. This is WorkSafe BC. And again, I haven't tried this myself, but with everything else I've seen, I wouldn't be surprised that they would take this stuff seriously and help you. Uh, yeah. So hopefully that answers the question from the person in the gallery. Procedures. So I think it's important that I'd love for everybody to access the documents that are available, but just to get this kind of a first kick at the can here. Employers are responsible for implementing procedures to respond to reports of incidents and of bullying and harassment, and they have to ensure that reasonable response. But when you're looking at developing and implementing procedures to deal with this stuff, you have to include the following: how and when the investigation will be conducted, what will be included, the scope of the investigation, the roles and responsibilities of everyone who's involved, and what kind of follow up can people expect, the types of corrective actions, timeframes. If they say everything will be investigated in, I don't know, within 6 years, I don't think that would be a thorough kind of approach. Will it be addressed within 24 hours? Will you get a response? Will the investigation be conducted within the week that the incident happens? These things really help manage on the target side and on the supervisory side as well. If you don't know what your time frame to operate is, it makes it really hard to comply with. So you want those follow up parts to be clear in that policy, and what kind of record keeping will be enforced. So I'm just seeing a question here. Okay, so I think Jennifer just put the question that might have been anonymous earlier. So we've got the question is in the chat. So in addition to establishing the procedures, obviously responsibles have to make sure that they're followed, and this is why supervisors are important in the equation. A lot of us supervisors are the ones that have to deal with this, so it's important that we know what's expected of us towards the workers and from the workers towards us. Workers should, and workers in this case would include supervisors, would be expected to cooperate with investigations and provide any information that they have. Everybody, employers, supervisors, workers should be cognizant of those reporting procedures. And again, WorkSafe BC has provided something for you that can be parallel to what's going to be discussed later by Don. At the bottom there, in the lighter blue box, the sample report complaint form on page 2. Super simple stuff to follow if you need to report or make a complaint, report an incident or make a complaint. So how to report is also included in this sample report complaint form. When to report, the answer is simple: as soon as possible. Whom to report to and alternate reporting contacts should be part of that. So going back to that question where there's a problem with nepotism in the workplace, then that whatever enforcement might happen is bound to be tainted by the subjective nature of those relationships. So you may need to go externally to make a report. And what needs to be included in a report, again, if you see this form. So the reports and complaints should include the following. And I'm pulling this from the WorkSafe BC document. So names of parties involved, witnesses to accidents, location, date, time, those details: who, what, when, where, how, and why. The details about the incident. What were the behaviors that were involved? And my suggestion to anybody who's doing this: be careful of subjective things. An objective report will be more meaningful, and saying, let's say you were the target of behavior, the person who's filing the report can say this action or this behavior was this and had this impact on me, is different from saying that person is mean. I would suggest that. But again, whoever's taking the report, just be mindful of subjective and objective elements to be clear on that reporting stance. Any additional details that can help with the investigation? Are there other circumstances or other things that need to be known by anybody who's reading the report that would help them understand what's going on or what went on? If there's any supporting documents or evidence, sometimes we see cyberbullying. If you've got screenshots of this kind of stuff, or if you can print emails that you see the bullying and harassment happening, that really help I'll say the response side of things for an investigation. Okay, how do supervisors fit in? Because I know I'm going on about all the sides of the equation, but just in case I haven't said it clearly enough yet, and this is I'll say CHRC talking. This isn't an Actsafe thing, but I'll say common sense from one manager to another. Supervisors can be expected to receive reports or complaints as per policies. You can be entrusted to conduct the investigation depending on the policies. You will most likely be involved at the investigation level at some point as part of the fact finding exercise because you are the person who's responsible for other workers on site. And you will most likely be asked for some background or context because we know that when somebody finally reports or makes a complaint, that is one thing, but there has often been a lot of behavior leading up to it. So we may be asked for context and background and credibility assessments. The he said, she said, or he said, she said, they said, to any one of those combinations may require a credibility assessment. There are people who are compulsive liars in the workplace, and we know about that, and that plays against them. So everybody, be honest, act properly, and what comes out of our respectful workplaces discussions all the time is basically summed up as, don't be a jerk towards others, don't let others be jerks towards you. Is the very very kind of layman's way of putting it. And I won't reveal it yet, but you have the direct link here for the Actsafe checklist for supervisors. Again, I can't say enough good about this tool, and I'm looking forward to hearing Don present it later. Procedures for investigations, because again, you may as a supervisor be involved in the actual investigation. Sorry, I see something that came in. Okay, I think we'll save the comment that we just got for the Q&A later. Can we put a pin in that, Dawn, please, or Jennifer, just to make sure? Okay, because I'm not sure if I don't want to read it out loud just now, so I'll just stick to this. Dawn, interrupt me if you see something that would relate directly to these considerations. Okay. Employers have to implement procedures to respond and report for reports and all that. Like things have to be in place. The mechanisms have to be there. And this has to include how and when the investigation will be conducted, what's included, again, the scope, the people involved, follow-ups. All of this has to be in established procedures and policies. We know that it's hard enough to deal with the bad behavior, or that folks that are targets of this behavior have to, there's already enough trouble with it. But if we don't take care of properly addressing these things, it's going to just become worse. So investigations, things that should be considered, um, because improper activity has to be reported and investigated, and this is a WorkSafe standard. But fair investigations should be impartial, unbiased. So going back to that nepotism question, it's going to be really hard to be unbiased there. It has to be conducted with an open mind. We have to be mindful of confidentiality, and it has to be free of reprisal. People need to be able to have that space where it's safe for them to speak up. You know, I'll say at best, this becomes a discussion. Somebody gets told this behavior is wrong, and the other person is satisfied that it was addressed. That's like probably the best outcome we can hope for, is that we can have those open discussions, or have that corrective action come in without it being a hugely punitive approach. We have to be very mindful when we're investigating that there are additional complexities. There can be questions of unconscious bias, discrimination, whether it's direct or systemic, personal or interpersonal. Microaggressions are more and more being discussed, and the intersectionality aspect of a lot of these situations. So, if you are launching into an investigation, please review this list, think about all these things, and if there's something that you are not comfortable with, it's better to address it ahead of time. The investigation procedures, and this is from CHRC's HR toolkit. This particular resource is free from and available from CHRC. And if you click on the link that's there at the bottom here, the HR toolkit, you will be able to access this. It's just to help you out. The preparation phase should include X, Y, and Z. There is the fact gathering exercise, which is the actual investigation. If you have to conduct interviews, who should you contact? collect and review any material, and reporting and decision making. So I don't want to belabor this. If you are in a situation where you are conducting an investigation and you need some extra resources, here are some, but you also have some from WorkSafe. If you read through both of those, you probably have a good leg to stand on to move forward. In all cases, this is just a bit of added material for you for your benefit. Hopefully, it can serve. What kind of conflict resolving style do you have? Are you avoidant? If you are avoidant, then investigations and such will probably not fit well with you. If you're accommodating, maybe you're somebody who can get ahead of the conflict before it escalates and find a way for people to find that peace in the workplace. Are you a competitor? Are you somebody who seeks compromise, or are you a collaborator? So different conflict resolving styles. And if we're aiming for a win-win situation, we obviously want to work on communication. Assertiveness is important. It's important to stake, what is necessary for everybody involved. Asking questions and being in listening mode. We need to listen as much as possible. In a situation like this, I'm doing all the talking. Sorry about that. But when we're faced with conflict, it's important to listen and to be sensitive to nonverbal cues and being aware of cultural or individual differences. To that effect, sorry, I'll just skip ahead by one here. Different types of intelligence. I like to share this. It's a 13-page read, really easy, but I can sum it up for you. There are different types of intelligence. There are the people that are like, I call it book smart. They know a lot of things, or they know a lot about things. IQ, emotional quotient. How good are you at gauging the emotional cues in others and yourself? Social quotient, SQ. How good are you at determining, different situations in terms of social interactions and what are the undercurrents there? Change quotient, how good are you at managing change? Because that can be a big source of conflict. So also, being aware of those different cultural differences can really help. Reporting, it's hard enough to be dealing with being the target of behavior, or people that are dealing with these types of behaviors. We've got a whole bunch of fear elements that make reporting harder. Let's support those that have something to say, and really be mindful of retaliation and not avoiding making conflict worse than it is. So let's try to remove the fear element by being ready to engage in these difficult conversations and doing the work that's necessary by preventing and responding when something happens. Just a few other tools. I'm plugging some CHRC stuff in there, but frankly, your WorkSafe BC stuff and your Actsafe direct partner are really the folks that I would go to immediately. But if you want a little more, it's there, and we're making that available. Back to the help is nearby. You've got that prevention information line if somebody is, if things aren't being addressed properly in your workplace. And there's even a workers' advisors office. I found out about this through some research, and employers' advisors office. So the resources are there, folks. Access them. Your taxpayer dollars at good work. I think you I wouldn't hesitate to jump in on that stuff. Support, again, more of the same, and there are some other things out there. There's a Canada 24/7 365 line that you can call. These are really crisis lines. So if you are on the brink, call. You can even text to the the crisis text line. There are Canadian crisis centers that you can access, and there's a BC direct crisis line. So if you are a target of behavior, and you're there, call these folks. They're there to help. Okay, we've got a few minutes. Would this be a good time to look at the question that came in, or should we save that for the Q&A, Don? Now that you've had a chance to read it.
Yeah, let's save that for the Q&A. I think what I'd like to do is I'll quickly go through the checklist as sort of, and then that will, because I've got a few thoughts on those questions already, and we can kind of a little bit of witty banter back and forth about these things, and
Okay.
also a couple of things. I'll do this and a couple of things I want to follow up on before we go into Q&A, because there's been a lot of really interesting things you've brought up, and some of the questions touch on them as well. I'll cover off a couple of those really quick.
Okay.
Yes, you have a lot of resources in these pages. I love it. It's absolutely amazing. And yes, some of them we follow with fairly regularly, but there's also probably going to be a couple in there that are relatively new. So we can, this is all part of the thing with us working with other HSAs and organizations. We introduce new things to them. They introduce new things to us from across the country, which is incredibly valuable. I remember when we were doing Ape Week and we were sitting around at the cafe tables talking about, wait, you haven't heard about this? Oh, this new resource is out here. And that information exchange is absolutely vital, and which is why CHRC and Grégoire have been absolutely invaluable to us over the years, and it's been really fun working together. So again, thank you so much for doing this. All right, really quickly, I'll jump into the checklist and give you a little bit of information. I'll just walk you through it really quick. So it'll be a little hard to read here. Jen has just dropped it into the chat as well, so you can open up the PDF. This will be available on the website as a fillable PDF, and you can take it and do what you want with it. If you want a Word version, let me know, because it's something that you can take, alter, and make it your own, which is one of the points I'll get to in response to some of the other things. When you see a lot of those templates, including this document that I'm about to walk you through, it's really important that you do the work for your own organization and make sure you address the things that are specific hazards, concerns, and highlights for your team. And address them in documents such as this. So those are really important to keep that in mind as you move forward. So here we are, our new workplace bullying and harassment report and a supervisor's response checklist. So this was built in consultation with pretty much the whole team here at Actsafe, and some outside influences. Talked to a few people from our standing committees, and a few other resources that we kind of tied this all together. In general, as you know, we try to create documentation that will be easy to access and digest, and be relatively useful, and of course, adaptable. I think this one ticks all those boxes. Really happy with all the work the team did on it, and of course, it's a nice, simple document. Try to keep it so it's not 19 pages long, because as most of you have heard from me in the past, if you have to reach over to the shelf and pull a binder down about your bullying and harassment process and program, it's not really working very well. You need it simple enough that you can understand it and administer it and apply it in the workplace readily whenever these things come up. So at the top, there's a kind of a statement about how it's supposed to be used, and some points about what a supervisor's role is. The first box there is to know, review and understand your organization's existing policies and procedures. This is one of the big gaps, and I think Grégoire can kind of confirm a lot of groups haven't done this work. A lot of this doesn't exist in a lot of workplaces. So that's one of the first things as a supervisor you should be asking when you take on a role at an organization. What are your thoughts, policies? What are your procedures around these things? And I don't know, Grégoire, I'm going to get to this in a minute, but how often are you still hearing this, and is that often a question you're still getting? We'll follow up on that after this, because I know it's one I still get all the time. Responding with emotional intelligence, which was one of the qualities you had listed in that one slide there. Being fully present, active listening, hold space for them, make the time, don't have distractions, close your laptop, make sure you're giving them their full attention. Empathy and validate their feelings, absolutely. And I saw a question come up about training about active use of empathy and compassion. I usually throw in that. Great question. Refrain from casting judgment. So, I'll just leave it at that. And thank them for sharing their experience. And I apply that to all safety things, not just bullying and harassment, but thank you for letting me know. Please feel comfortable bringing me those concerns, and we will take this seriously and move forward with it. The other thing that I also say that comes a little bit later is make sure you let them know that you've actually moved it forward, that something's happened with it. Just give them a little bit of feedback as to what's going on. And at that point, you probably want to remind them about the procedure, what the company's procedures are. Act promptly if you suspect or become aware of bullying and harassment. It's responsible to get it moved forward and find an appropriate help find an appropriate resolution. Document, acknowledge the receipt of the issue, like when they bring it to you. Often it'll be verbal. It'll be a quick conversation. Jot something down, share an email between each other, and make sure you have some way of tracking that. Logbooks are good. We've talked about a little bit of that in some of our other training, especially in safety for supervisors. We talk about having I don't really call them a safety logbook, but a decision logbook, where you say, okay, on this day, I had this conversation with so-and-so, and just keep a note of it. So later on, if there's an investigation or something else comes up, you have something that leads you back to where that started, or you have some sort of record of what it was, when it happened, and what kind of the circumstances were around that. Inform, so make sure that the supervision, the workers under your supervision, and that's I have a whole story about all that works, because you can be a supervisor without even knowing it. And make sure you let them know what the possible hazards are. So I'll give you a little example. When you're working in a roadhouse theater, you may have a client coming in that there may be uncomfortable content in a show. Letting them know about that ahead of time. So inform them of what the potential hazards are in an activity or a show, and that goes to all sorts of other things. But when you're referring to bullying and harassment specifically, there are certain things that you can highlight for them as potential things that they want to watch out for. Support. So again, follow up with them. Make sure they're aware of what the procedures are, and then, like I said, as things progress, let them know what's going on. Maintain confidentiality. That's a big thing. That was also a question that came up, was about the development about factual and objective reporting. We do have a new investigations course that's going to be coming out here shortly, and it does touch on that a bit. There's some nuances to it, and of course, freedom of information training is another one that you can take that can help kind of guide what that looks like as far as keeping things anonymous. There's some tips and tricks you can use that will help with that. And lastly, be a respectful workplace champion. This one I quite like. Make sure your attitude and behavior, including your words and actions, reflect the company's values. I'll stretch this out to say, lead by example. As we were talking about just before we start, don't be a jerk. And also support people that if you see people demonstrating positive behavior you want to see, reinforce that. Thank you for being respectful. Thank you for asking that question in a respectful manner. I really appreciate the way you approach that problem in an open-minded way. Those are all things that really go a long way to help build that, what's the word, more supportive and welcoming environment. I don't know about everybody in the chat. We have 45 people still here, but I can tell you I've worked in some of those spaces, and simple things by anybody in the team can really help kind of buoy that attitude in that environment. So again, and at the bottom there are some references here as well. You'll see some of them are similar to what Grégoire has presented. We didn't want to overload this list as well. The other reason that I like this list is it will also help you identify gaps in your own organization. So if you're a supervisor and you take this into your workplace and go, hey, I found this really cool thing at this webinar we just did with Actsafe. Have you seen this? And then the employer can start going, wait, oh, we don't actually do that. And it'll help spark a conversation to help employers move forward and hopefully give us a call and we can have a chat with them about helping improve that program and helping move it forward. So again, this, like many of our other resources, will be free and is available on the website. And it's also in the chat here. And you can follow up with us at any time if you want a copy of this. Again, super proud of the work the team did to get this together. All I was really was a funnel to get this to you. And you can expect more stuff coming. We have other resources that are, of course, we're always developing stuff. And there will be more things that will be attached to things like our inspections course and our investigations course. All come with follow-up materials, will help with different things. Bullying and harassment will be part of investigations for sure. And that's something that needs to be addressed. And you need to be able to have that as part of your investigations plan and follow-up. Not to mention the roles that joint health and safety committees play in this, worker representatives play in this. And also the other thing that I'll touch on right now is the reporting structure. So if you don't have a program, sometimes that reporting structure isn't really clear. So those are things that we quite often, I know I get lots of calls about that from workers in the workplace. And as Grégoire mentioned earlier on, if you can't find a resolution inside your organization, there's always the WorkSafe hotline that you can call. And then that will trigger them to assist you in some way. All right. So that is our new checklist. So please, if you have questions or concerns about the checklist, always get in touch with myself, Will Heller, or you can go right through the information line or the chat on our website and get us some information. I will drop my email in just a few minutes so that you've got that as well. Or maybe Jen, you can do that so that I don't have to stop and type because I'm terrible at it. That's the checklist, and that's what I wanted to cover off. So just before we move into Q&A, the other thing that I wanted to, what was the other thing I was going to touch on? I didn't write it down. I forgot what
if,
it
if,
was.
if you want to think about it, I'd just like to reinforce something you said before we go to the Q&A, which is exactly what I'd like to come as an outcome for this discussion, is that for anybody whose workplace doesn't have all this stuff, please go to the employer and say, hey, we heard about this. What do you think? It's a super easy inroad and shameless ploy for Actsafe and CHRC. We on a limited basis, we can actually help employers get through, get these steps taken care of. We don't especially for CHRC, I can't speak for Actsafe, we don't want to write the policies for people, but the BC WorkSafe stuff is so abundant and well laid out that it's really easy to go from zero to having what you need in place. So sometimes, as supervisors, especially because we have that we're in that in between role, we're in a position where we have to say something and we can actually see that it gets done. So I'd encourage, as Don said, have that conversation. And if your
Yeah.
employer is confused or doesn't know what to do, there are resources in the slide deck, there are resources in the one that's on screen here, super easy to access. And we are just a phone call away. So help is near. To the factual and objective reporting question that Don, you were talking about, and you have direct courses for that. There is some online training. I'd say go with Actsafe because they're your local partner and they're right there, so they'll be able to help readily. There are courses with let's say investigations training. If you access one of our tools, which is in the slide deck that I've presented on the tools and resources page, I've got two things that can be shared. Le Guide d'appui au gestionnaire, we have an English version coming out, but we were going through it because we wanted to remove as much genderized language as possible. And that has sample, there are templates for, asking somebody to come in for an interview, a response to a complaint or an incident report. You've got a whole bunch of sample letters that can really help you. And there are some tips and tricks on factual and objective reporting. But basically, just to answer the question is, if something is an impression or a perception, wouldn't be considered, not necessarily it's not factual, but it's not objective. The wall is X color, or this happened in the room and it is verifiable, then that's usually objective. As for the use of empathy skills, that's something that not everybody is able to develop. And that's a conversation I think we need to have with ourselves and with our supervisors and employers. If I'm not in a position that I can demonstrate some empathy, but I'm the one who has to take the reports of incidents or complaints, that can be a huge liability. You want to check in to make sure that you can do that, because if somebody comes to you and reports something and you break down, you're not helping the person who had the problem in the first place. So that's something to be mindful of. And it's, the difference between understanding what the person is saying and recognizing that versus, you know, feeling that sharing that, I'll say, pain, which becomes very interpersonal. So that moves beyond empathy towards sympathy. Again, not a trauma informed counselor, not a therapist, so I won't go any
Right.
further than that. But I think we had to answer that question.
That's a very good point. That actually reminded me of what my other point was, and that's the people part of the equation. So when you look at the whole reporting and how this environment works, there's often better people equipped for the reporting and response. So that's one of the things. It's really hard to quantify, and it's like you say, not everybody's equipped with the same tools, the emotional intelligence or experience. So those are things that we definitely have to look for, and it can really make a vital difference in how it plays out in a workplace. I don't have really great resources or answers for that specific one, but it's definitely something I would love to see some more work done on. Just before we go to some questions, and I'll run through I've got them in the list here. I'll run through them really quick. I just want two aha moments for me. One is the intent piece. That's a really good point that I don't feature a lot in my discussions around bullying and harassment. That intent isn't excuses, it isn't a reason for any of that, and should probably highlight that one. The other one was your slide on resolution styles. I thought that was really good. I like that, and I'd like to look into that a little bit more. So thank you for those, because those are definitely, for me as a safety professional, those are, I always love finding those nuggets, and I'm like, wait, that's a really good point. And that's something we could probably do a whole session on at the conference, is just talking about resolution styles and how to leverage them and maximize those for effectiveness in an organization. Wow, I think I just wrote like a session thing right there. Anyway, thank you for that. That was awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go back to a couple of the questions. So as a supervisor, oh, hold on. Let's go back to. I'll touch on the nepotism one. Okay, so nepotism is one of several things that can color that conversation, and I'm gonna remove nepotism and use a relationship. So it might be people that are dating. It might be family members. It might be people who are engaged. It might be people who've worked together since they were in college. Those kind of things always color the conversation and can certainly change the relationship or whether or not you're comfortable reporting. So, so outside of the nepotism, it's a little bit broader. It's a really good question. But again, a lot of times, if you're not comfortable with that, then sometimes your only resource is to go to WorkSafe BC if you feel that has hindered the process as you move forward. Again, that's after you've gone through what is supposed to be the organization's policies and procedures. Then you need to start looking outside of that. What was the other one here? Okay. Did you have any thoughts on further thoughts on that one, Greg?
No, I think I think you covered that very eloquently. It's always a question of somebody has to be made accountable, and if it doesn't happen in house, then you have to go out of house. And you've got WorkSafe BC is probably one of the clearest, because I've seen these in different parts of the country.
Yeah.
WorkSafe has that line: call us, boom.
Yeah, exactly.
Very accessible. So,
Exactly.
and I like the fact that you included all types of relationships. And we had some case studies, but we didn't look at the case studies in my presentation because the questions that are coming in are actually, I'll say, better than looking at these things. And I have to congratulate those that have sent in questions, because you've managed to present it without it being, I'll say, too without it being a heavy problematic. We're looking at behaviors and situations, which can always be tricky. So if you want, we could move on to the next one, which had to do with patrons
Yeah. So I've got the
as a
question
bullying
here.
and harassment.
So increase in violence and harassment from patrons, which is something we're talking about in a totally different area, which is a very real thing. It was brought up at a meeting with managers, and as a supervisor, they were actually afraid in the workplace, and this response was belittled. Is belittling that response an example of bullying and harassment? And what do you do when that comes directly from the employer? Part of that, I will say, refers back to that previous conversation, where if it's happening at that level, then you may have to go to WorkSafe BC, depending on what that looks like. The other thing is there's a bit of context too. What was the language used? What was the environment at the table? What was the tone? Sometimes plays into that question of the belittling, and those are things that we don't know. We can't really tell in this context if that's what's happening. Again, back to Greg's previous, don't be a jerk, right? Be respectful, and addressing those concerns respectfully will often mean that you don't feel belittled in that conversation. So definitely something that should be flagged. The other thing is was this discussed with the Joint Health and Safety Committee, or members of that Joint Health and Safety Committee? Would have been another thing that I would add to that kind of thing. And again, if all of those fails, you always have WorkSafe BC to go talk to.
Yeah, that's basically what I would have said as well. And as we've seen in the legislation stuff, again, not a lawyer, but it's really, really clear. If the clients or patrons are bullying and harassing workers, that is a case of bullying and harassment in the workplace. And if it's not addressed properly,
Yeah.
I'd say go to WorkSafe BC.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I don't know if you've experienced this. I've experienced this where I bring something up and people kind of disregard it. Sometimes the choice of words we use isn't forceful enough, and that's where the assertiveness side of things has to come out.
Good point.
Saying, this is a problem, whereas no, not beating around the bush. And again, I don't have the context, so I'm not judging or anything, but making sure that we're assertive. This is a workplace problem. and this is having this and this impact or this effect or output or outcome on the workforce, making sure that that's very clear. And if you still don't get the response you want, then yeah,
Yeah.
call WorkSafe BC. They've got
So
that line there.
the other thing I'm going to tie into this, and with bullying and harassment, and this is something we talk about in some of our courses, is a couple of things. One, make sure you're reporting all of the incidents. So even the minor ones that you may not think, because if they get registered and recorded in some format, you can see a pattern, which also helps back up the more serious cases. The other one is, if you're feeling alone, if you're seeing the stuff, ask somebody to join you as a witness or somebody to accompany you when you talk about these things to help back you up and give you a little bit of support. That can help both emotionally and also in a due diligence kind of format. Those things can help in those situations. Those are kind of tips and tricks that I've heard, taught, maybe used to help move those along. And don't forget, the other variable here is every employer has a different experience level. Some of them haven't done any training on bullying and harassment. Some of them are very experienced in it or even have some HR background. So that is also a variable that plays into these conversations. All right, what was the next one? So we had the question about skills about factual and objective reporting and the use of empathy and skill. The empathy skill part, I don't have a lot of resources on that training specifically. I've done some courses that have included it and been very good. I'd love to find some more resources and share those with the group for sure. And I've got that as a note here to kind of look out for that, because there's some work we want to do on the psychological safety side in 2023. So that will probably come into that conversation as well when we get into that.
Yeah, if I could build on that, that guide that I was talking about earlier, dealing with harassment in cultural workplaces. When we were researching this, we were looking at the different training options out there, and more, like you've got university training, you've got very varying levels, and one of them that I see is investigations training, and I took their course, and for factual stuff, it was good. But a lot of these like 1 week training modules that exist now usually include some form of empathy or trauma informed. I don't want to say counseling, but there is a bit about that where, let's see how it is between empathy and sympathy to make sure that we're not causing further damage, or not disregarding things that would be important and imperative as part of the investigation. Because if we touch back on the intent side, and kind of the standard to establish bullying and harassment is that intent isn't necessarily the standard to for
Yeah,
guilt. If I could
yeah.
air quote that. Sorry, I've only have one air quote at the time. And the other thing is, if it's intimidating and humiliating is also part of that standard. So if somebody says, "Oh, they were super rude, they were bullying and harassing me," and you say, "Okay, so did you feel intimidated?" No, no, they're an idiot. I don't care what they say. Well, then it's a little harder to make a case for bullying and harassment. Whereas, yes, I felt intimidated or I felt humiliated. Okay, well, that's starting to that starts or meets the standard. So that's one of the, I guess, backup pieces that you might want to include, you know, asking the question, how did this behavior make you feel? If the person, flips it off, then that's one thing. If they say, those key words, then you will probably want to follow up
Yeah,
on that.
yeah,
And to the point about formalized policies and procedures, this is something that I caution when I'm, I'll say, acting as a consultant or an advisor on people writing policies, is to make sure that they're not so rigid that you tie that function to a specific post and that it or position that it's you can't separate it from that. If you hire somebody who's a great supervisor to do X, Y, and Z work, but part of their job description is receiving complaints, but they are not the right person to do so, you need to have that option to pull that out of your policy and redirect rapidly. And
yeah,
that's why all of these policies, these templates that I was sharing with you earlier, I didn't put them up on screen, but they all say, you should report to this person or this person. It isn't necessarily tied to a specific position.
yeah.
You could have somebody who's not a supervisor, who's the person who receives the complaints, because that is part of their personal, interpersonal, or professional skill sets.
Yeah. So actually, great. That is a perfect segue right there, because there was just a thing put in the chat where there's somebody who works with their spouse in a workplace, and they and is their direct supervisor. They put in a procedure so that nobody, if there's ever a concern about their spouse, it doesn't come to them. It goes to somebody else. Which is that whole thing about that reporting structure and recognizing that there might be a conflict of interest or a challenge with one of those reporting positions, that's great. And then the note says that a lot of people felt it was not necessary because we're not trustworthy. And so I applaud you for doing that. First of all, that's an amazing recognition of the potential, even if there's not a problem, conflict of interest or a stumbling block, and putting in a procedure to go around that. I will say this again, exceeding what is put in the regulation, I love it. Do what you feel is appropriate for your organization, and I think that's absolutely the right thing to do, even if it's a perfect relationship. Those are things that you want to equip. Backing up to that a little bit, the whole idea, and there was a follow-up about the compassion, empathy, compassion question. There's an HR piece here. So if within your organization you're not able to equip your team with the skills needed to deal with these things, right? So if you're putting people in positions that don't have the skill set actually needed to do the empathic and compassionate question and answer, then that becomes a thing that has to be looked at on the other side. And so, not every team has been built that way. Not every team's done the training. Not every team has recognized that it's a skill set that's even needed. So those are really things that can be put into multiple categories, whether or not it's HR. Are you hiring for those skills and putting them inside your team? Are you training for those skills to put it inside your team to deal with these things? Those are all questions that employers have to tackle, and often should be coming through A, reporting, and B, the work that joint health and safety committees are doing, saying, hey, we need this support in the organization, and identifying that through those meetings and those issues that are coming up in the workplace, which through a lot of the training and work that's been done over the last 10 years is becoming more commonplace. Even the fact that we're having this conversation now probably wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. So all of those play into the same kind of issue and concern.
If I can go back to the trustworthy comment, one of the reasons why this, I won't mention who it was, why you are deemed trustworthy is probably because you're willing and opening up that vulnerability and saying, the door is open, and that builds trust. And trust is something that is so easily lost, and it's so damaging. So it's important to be open about these things. And one of the things that I've built in with my performance evaluations in CHRC is when we're doing performance evaluations, I also throw myself into that, and I tell the employees, okay, we're in a performance evaluation cycle. So if there is something that you'd like to say about me, you can send it directly. In this case, there's a bit of a workaround to make sure that I don't see anything.
Yeah.
Is that they send it to the webmaster, and the webmaster simply forwards the email to the chair and the secretary for them. So I can't see, I can't see who said what about anything. And I think that's a really important one to have it, and encourage your employees or workers to make those feedback points, because it can go both ways. It can be positive, it can also be negative. And making yourself available for critique is, I think, one of the really good ways to gain that trust. Obviously, you have to act properly if you get negative feedback, but it's a whole other interpersonal thing.
So a quick follow-up. So I just got a follow-up note that the previous note about the violence from patrons being addressed and belittled, that behavior actually happened during a joint health and safety committee meeting. So that goes back to joint health and safety committee effectiveness, and that is definitely not a place we want to hear that kind of stuff happening. So that for me would be a bit of a red flag, and certainly something I would want to bring up and make sure that is addressed with the employer, and make sure that behavior is corrected, because that is definitely not where we want to hear that stuff happening. And please feel free to follow up with me directly if you want some more insights on how that can look, because I've had to help people navigate that a few times. This is, again, where groups like Workers Advisory Group can help with some of those questions if you're not comfortable. I just wanted to move on to another one, which can't, because we got about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to skip over the humor one for the moment, because I wanted to get to the other one, which is employer actively discouraging people from reporting, and then suggesting that they go to the larger organization's HR department and stuff. And the question is, would you suggest engaging those internal supports before WorkSafe BC or maybe at the same time? So just to give you a little bit of context, we will ask you the same questions when you bring a situation to us. We will always ask, A, did you report it to your supervisor? B, did you report it to the Joint Health and Safety Committee? And if you didn't have one, did you get it to the employer in some format? If you have exhausted those, then we would say activate WorkSafe BC. So the same thing in this case, if they're suggesting you do those things, I would say you have to kind of follow those first, because WorkSafe BC is likely going to ask you the exact same questions. So the short answer is yes, you should use those first. Give the employer every opportunity to correct it through their policies and procedures. And then once you've exhausted those, then WorkSafe BC is always there to give you a hand. At least that's how the system's set up to work. Is it perfect? No, but a good question, and we get that one quite often. Greg, any follow up on that one?
No, I think you've got that. I'd be happy to tackle the humor one.
Yeah, let's do it.
This has come up a lot. I've seen this when we do the Respectful Workplace in the Arts workshops, and people raise their hand. They say, "Well, we're not allowed to make any jokes anymore." I'm not going to say nobody's allowed to make any jokes, but you really have to be careful that you're not stepping in it. And there's a tolerance piece in each work environment. And the thing is, if people engage in this kind of stuff, you have to do it, I'll say, a smart fashion. If you're making jokes, but you can't take jokes on yourself, then, there's something wrong here. I don't discourage jokes in the work environment, but the unsavory ones, things that they go directly against anything that's a protected human rights ground, I would say is really not a good idea unless you're absolutely certain that you have that relationship with the person. But even then, if Don and I don't know, we're best of buds and we trade off really unsavory jokes all the time, but somebody else hears that, it can be humiliating or intimidating for them. And so what was okay between us is not okay with somebody else. I'd caution against it. And it's not that we want boring work environments, but we are in a professional situation.
We want
it's not our personal
work environments, and that's a big
yeah.
piece. Yeah, I agree. And that exact scenario has come up a couple of times through channels, and that's pretty common right now. So it's definitely something that you need to train and talk about in your organization for sure.
Yeah, and being tolerant either way, because you know what, I'm a francophone, and well, English parent, French parent, so I've had it from both sides. I've had anglophones calling me a frog all my life, and I've had francophones calling me a squarehead all my life. So I won't say I've become immune to it, but it isn't something that triggers me anymore. But that was just part of reality for forever, and so eventually, I'm not saying that people have to build up a tolerance and disregard it, but I've had circumstances in, let's say, family situations where I'm being called one or the other, and I'll fire back outside of the professional environment. But if we're willing to make jokes, we have to be willing to suffer the jokes as well. So sometimes it's just better to not.
So we got an interesting one here. So we've got 1 minute left in our. Lisa, can I get you to pop up the QR code? I'll just address that really quick. So for all of you that are still here, all 40 of you, please click on the QR code and answer a few simple questions for us. We love your. Oh, sorry, no, this is for registering for the Joint Health and Safety Committee webinar February 3rd, which is coming up, and which the link was also put in by Jen. Thank you very much, which is very timely. See how I did that? I worked in the Joint Health and Safety Committee for you to do that. So please jump on that QR code and get in there and register for that, because we might expand on a few of these things, because believe you me, these questions are going to be cataloged to move on with. I'm going to, we have one question left there from Kevin. And I'd like to address that, but I just want to let everybody know we are at time. So if you want to stick around, we've got a few minutes, and I think Grégoire and I would like to tackle this question really quick to wrap up. But before we do, I just wanted to thank the Actsafe team, Jen, Melissa, Trina, Janelle, everybody that helped put this together. Thank you very much. This has been absolutely fabulous. And Greg, thank you for being here as well. So I'm just going to quickly jump into that last question, which is working with students in a school kind of environment. And there's some struggles with correct use of pronouns. I've run on one across this a few times. I struggle with it from time to time. I fully admit that. And there I am admitting one of my biases. Again, I'm still learning how to do that respectfully and in the right amount of time. So there's not been a lot of complaints, but it's a struggle for them. Any thoughts on that?
I'm actually, I'd like to say something about that. This is from the write-up is a really good example of, you know, finding that point of tolerance and being assertive. Sometimes we all make mistakes. That's the thing. So that tolerance piece, and I tie this into the jokes earlier, where, sometimes people foul up. Do we need to take them to court immediately? Can we be assertive and be positive in our in addressing this? Hey, sorry, okay, I think you weren't meaning ill, but I just want to let you know this is something that is a sensitive point for me. And if somebody intentionally repeats it, that's a whole other story. But people get it wrong. And actually, the pronoun thing, if I can tie another quite a little example from life, having lived with French and English on both sides, a lot of Anglophones, when they're speaking in French, misgender anything, from the table to me, or
Yeah.
and so maybe I'm a little biased. You were talking about bias. Maybe I'm a little biased on that, and I'm a little more tolerant to it. But I totally understand, and I totally agree that we have to be mindful of other people and their identity.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants a certain set of pronouns, we have to respect it. But people are going to get things wrong all the time. Even just speaking in a regular conversation, we get things wrong. Wrong verb tenses, wrong grammar. So let's make sure that we're not looking at crucifying or really attacking people for smaller mistakes that are, let's go back to the reasonable person standard. We all make mistakes,
And
so let's try to be tolerant but assertive.
And I did want to point out that from the way that this is written in the chat, congratulations. This is a very healthy conversation. I think it's moving in the right direction. This is exactly the kind of thing we want to see happening. It looks like it is a respectful process. And like you say right there, it's turned into sort of a well-meaning, respectful group project, which is great. If more people are learning from it and experiencing a positive end result, awesome. That is awesome. So I think we got through most of them. Greg, that is amazing. And we're 3 minutes over. I'm super happy with how this turned out. Thank you all for the amazing questions. Again, thank you for your honesty and sharing, because that is such a key part of how we help these things move forward. And Greg, thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait until we actually get to sit in a room together and chat. And thank you for all of your group's amazing work. So I'm going to wrap. Any final words you have for the group before we wrap up?
For me?
Yeah, from you.
I will impart great wisdom with these last words. Whenever something's going wrong, remember these words. What would Dawn do?
Well, thank you very much, Greg. And yes, what would Dawn do? First Wednesday of every month. If you want to sign up, let me know. We kind of have these conversations once a month. So thank you for tying that in. That was not prompted. I didn't pay him for that. But thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And stay tuned, everybody. News on the conference is coming up. There's a slide there with some more contact information. And the slide deck will be available to you at some point. And we'll probably post it on the website as well. So thanks again to the team. Thanks to everybody that helped out. Thanks, Greg, for making the time. And I can't wait to work together soon. So have a great afternoon, everybody. This was amazing. Thanks again.